Hey guys, it's me, Joe. You probably haven't seen anything from me in a while. It's been, I think, probably many more months since I uploaded my last full-length video. And I always think it's super boring when YouTubers talk about their excuse for not doing it, and that's not what I want to do with this disclaimer. I just want to say that I'm in this thing for the long run. I really love making these videos, so don't worry. I'm not forgetting about anybody or anything, but I have a perfectionism bug deep in my fucking brain. You know, I'm writing these scripts over and over and over, filming so many takes, spending just tens of hours in editing because I want the product to look perfect. I really want you guys to enjoy my content. That's goal number one. So stick with me, bear with me. Sorry for taking such a long time. I hope I become more efficient in the future. Peace, and I hope you enjoy the video. So, let's talk about it. Let's talk about superstition. Look, whether you're going to church every Sunday and, reading your Bible before bedtime, scanning the horoscope to find out what the future holds for you, laying out some tarot cards to find out your date of death, or maybe you're just sticking some crystals up your ass with some good vibrations. All of this, and I don't think it's controversial to say, is superstition. Now, I'm personally not superstitious, and the goal of this video is not for me to establish my dominance over all the religious normies, or to debunk your fairy tales, or some cringy thing like that. I don't want this to be a Ricky Gervais special where I stand up on this stage and try to think of a clever way to call Christians stupid for believing in a guy in the sky for the 100th time.
They go, why don't you pray just in case there's a God? And I say, why do you put garlic over your door just in case there's a Dracula? Right?
That's super cheesy, super obnoxious, and really superficial. And for that matter, I don't want to poke fun at any superstitious person. Not the crystal girls, not the numerologist nerds. This video isn't about that. And there is no grain of sarcasm in there, I promise. Because I mean, look, firstly, we've already seen guys that are much smarter than me, like David Hume, for example, and many others, put together really well-worded, cohesive, thought-out arguments that destroy the idea of an all-powerful God, or destroy the idea of the necessity for us to blindly worship one. And I don't want to just repeat their words and make myself feel good because of that. And non-religious superstitions like healing crystals, astrology, etc., they've simply never passed any accredited scientific tests, so there isn't much to talk about there either. Also, there really isn't that much merit to dancing on God's grave in 2023. I mean, modern pop atheism oftentimes comes down to these boring and worn-out arguments against religion, like,
You say, there's a God. I say, can you prove that? You say no. I say, I don't believe you then.
Or,
no, I have no interest in the Bible. But, I mean, it's a fairy tale.
Or to even really despicable campaigns against religious people, which in some cases can be argued to be just as distasteful and hateful as the crappy stuff that Westboro pulls.
I remember there was like one guy in my class that was religious and he got bullied because it was like pathetic. Because you're believing in Santa Claus, basically.
Jesus.
Yeah, but he did get bullied because he believed in God.
And needless to say, I didn't want to associate myself with that stuff. Once again, I didn't want to be the pretentious religion is opium for the masses guy, or it's a fairy tale for adults dude. So let's try to get away from these banal discussions and atheistic circle jerks and try to get a broader view of the topic at hand. What I want to do is try to distill superstition to its very core sentiments and try to give it some sort of value judgment. Discuss how healthy it is for individuals to devote a part or sometimes even all of themselves to superstition, and how it may affect our societies when they do so. We're going to discuss why people may latch onto a superstition in the first place, and towards the end, I want to try to have a more refined discussion about what kind of future we'd be looking at if we just cut superstition right out of our picture, and if it would be even possible to do so. Now, before we get down to business, I want to make it just absolutely clear that this video was not made from a place of negativity or hate. And I hope that with time, you guys will realize that none of my videos are ever made from a place of negativity or hate. Criticism of groups or individuals may play a pretty significant role in my content, but It's always done exclusively out of my interest in getting to the bottom of things and questioning the way that things stand. I never hold resentment for anybody. But sometimes I do have a problem with choices that people make or words that they may say, and there is a big difference between having a problem with somebody and something that they do. So please, instead of harassing people when you disagree with them, try to think of how you can share your perspective with them and make both of your lives better by doing so. I didn't know why I did that wink thing, by the way, sorry. It felt natural. Anyways, let's jump right into the first part. Is superstition even that bad? So, there's a few ways that we can look at things here. I mean, firstly, a lot of bad stuff comes from superstition. That's not a secret. Black cats are notoriously hard to find a home for because of their bad reputation. In some countries, you can get stoned to death if you swing on the gay side because of a superstition-ridden culture. In others, you might get cut up and sold to shamans for body parts if you're albino, and in others, well, let's just say you better be born with a penis if you want to live a good life. Now, also, let's not forget about the millions of lives lost in the Crusades, and also all the poor folk who were burned at the stake because the Inquisition deemed them witches. Now, please, don't get me the wrong way when I say this. I don't want to undermine all the evil bullshit that comes from people taking their beliefs to the extreme, but are you and I gonna sit around and pretend that that malicious shit is a consequence exclusive to extreme superstitiousness? Because guys, allow me to remind you that tens of millions of souls were executed by the hands of Stalin's regime, a regime that boasted atheism as one of its underpinning principles. Millions more were mutilated, starved, and burned alive in a fire fueled by anti-Semitism and extreme nationalism in mid-20th century. Now look, I can continue listing tragedy after tragedy, but I think you're catching on to what I'm going at. Look, if I pressed a button right now, did away with superstition, my main motive being to cleanse the world of all these deplorable actions that come along when people take superstition to the extreme, I wouldn't be doing you all any favors. We can't blame Westborough's hateful campaigns, for example, on religion itself. That would be missing the mark. We can place the blame, however, on ignorance. The act of blindly handing over your entire moral compass and spiritual autonomy to a belief, especially one that's exalted to a place that is immune to scrutiny and critical analysis, yeah, this can and inevitably does lead to what we call evil. The point that I'm trying to make here is that it doesn't matter if your radicality is founded in supernatural beliefs, political beliefs, really any belief framework that you may have. Zealotry is zealotry. Its root cause is the same for all fanatics. So if you're still with me, you're gonna understand why there isn't much point in including superstitious extremism in our discussion. Superstition itself is merely one of many catalysts that one can use to justify ignorance and immorality. It is not their root cause. Alright guys, I think that's behind us. Let's step away from these extreme examples, dial it down a notch, take a look at something a bit more moderate. Here's Johnny.
Hi.
Now, when Johnny was a young boy, his mother told him that if he didn't eat his veggies, the boogeyman would come for him. And obviously, Johnny ate his veggies. His mother was a staunch yet kind-hearted Christian. She found her calling and meaning in Jesus Christ and wanted to raise her child so he could do the same. As Jonathan grew up, his mother did not tell her son that he would burn in hell for masturbating or that God hates his gay classmates. She did, however, instill in him the habits of regularly going to church, praying daily, reading the Bible. And as you might have guessed, stealing, lying, fighting, and taking the God's name in vain were serious offenses in Jonathan's household. And they were also looked down upon in his church community. What started off as habits that young Johnny mindlessly followed just because his mom said so and because he didn't want to anger the Lord or the boogeyman, they developed into a full-fledged lifestyle for an older Johnny, one who in his college years began to dwell more on questions that concerned his calling, his meaning, his soul, and how he should go about living this life in general. Conveniently enough, all the answers were right around the corner. He and his mother were part of a rather sensible and adequate church community, meaning that there weren't really any extreme aspects of his superstition that could scare him away and cause him to rebel. Moreover than that, you guys gotta admit, it's really scary being in college. You know, you're 20, you gain some speck of consciousness, and now you're faced with the realization that the world is a vast, boundless ocean of ambiguity. You don't know anything about this ocean. Frankly, you're not ever gonna know anything about this ocean, and swimming in it, you resemble just a grain of sand swimming through space. This realization, when it befalls somebody in its full scope, brings an immense amount of discomfort. We feel small, uncertain, and lost like never before. Instinctively, and very logically so, human beings aren't very big fans of discomfort, in any form whatsoever, and we do our best to avoid it. Please, 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 don't let this pass you by. We cannot underestimate the scale of this discomfort when we consider how superstition, with its promises of answers, of wholeness, and of purpose, offers us an escape route from this dreadful state of unknowing. So, all these things considered, Jonathan doubled down on his faith and became a devout member of the Christian church. And now, 10 years later, our hero is an exemplary American. He's a hard worker, he's a loving father, he's a faithful husband, a churchgoer, a taxpayer, and you best believe, a volunteer at the local animal shelter. Now, looking at this hypothetical man's life, it's really difficult to prod and critique his way of being. I mean, he's literally the epitome of what we call good with a capital G member of society. And remember, it was his superstition with all of its thou shalt not kill thy neighbor and thou shalt not be a lazy asshole that was an essential building block in who he developed into. Now it's a good time to take a quick pause from Johnny's story and talk a little bit about doctrines. You know, sometimes I imagine doctrines as presets in RPG video games. Like, at the beginning of a lot of RPGs, you're given points that you can distribute between attributes like strength, charisma, and etc. Now, you kind of have two choices. You can choose to distribute those points yourself, which is a bit of a more difficult route. Unless you know the game really well and know how to build a perfect character, you're gonna have to put some trust in your ability to create a character that's gonna be viable and fun to play, and not some weird skill mutant that powers his way through the game God knows how. Or you can choose a preset, like fighter and thief, and then the points will just be distributed for you and you're guaranteed a viable character. So similarly, when we're faced with the terrifying ambiguity of the world that we live in, we have the option to try and figure things out on our own. This route is high risk, immensely difficult, and it's going to require the complete sacrifice of your psychological comfort. Because guess what, baby? You're going to have to construct your own moral compass, your own way of being, your own codex of life. And these things are going to have to undergo constant reworking and refinement until the very end of your days. Or you can go for a preset. Most people, they choose a few right off the bat. You know, cover all the bases. You can be a liberal Democrat Christian, or a conservative Catholic, or hell, why not, a libertarian socialist atheist. Pick a preset, pick as many as you like, and you can be on your way living life as a viable character. All superstitions are presets in one way or another. It's just that, obviously, fearing something bad will happen on Friday the 13th, that's going to dictate your life much more rarely and in a much more niche way than following an entire religion. That's the reason why I'm opting to use, namely Christianity, as the underlying example for this part, because it's the most comprehensive case study that I could think of for the sake of our video. And Christianity is a great example of a superstition-based preset that mass-produces pretty decent deeds. I mean, if you think about it, the 10 Commandments are just common sense rules to being a good guy. Don't steal, don't kill, don't lie, blah blah blah. While the others, like don't put any other god before me, are sprinkled in there to reinforce the faith and loyalty of followers. So, as I see it, all of this is a guidebook to being a generally good human being, while theology is thrown in to make it more fun and enticing to believe, and also to strengthen the incentive to do good, because heaven, and make you think twice before doing bad, because hell. Yeah, we talked about some factory defects, like the case of religious fanatics, but hey, as long as those comprise the overwhelming minority, how bad can superstition really be? Society can rest easy as their members are predictable, productive, and unthreatening, while people are generally content as they have a pre-built guide to life that makes the torment of being a clueless meatbag in a big and confusing world a bit more bearable. So guys, in order to have a really powerful and deep discussion about superstition, I think we need to first and foremost discuss this sentiment of the preset approach to life. I think that's going to get us much further than just droning on about separate theses of one given superstition or another, which always just turns into a wild goose chase. And I have two main critiques of batch-produced spirituality. Here's number one. Do you remember our boy Johnny? This might sound like a really weird question, but how good of a person is he, really? I know, he sounds great on paper, but why? Well, our homie reads the Bible and speaks with Jesus every Sunday. That's what he's been told to do. And this is exactly where the problem arises. I don't know if you guys can relate to this example, but my mom always told me about how bad smoking is when I was a kid, and all throughout my childhood. She constantly reminded me about the dangers and all the negative effects of the nasty habit, and she made me promise that I'd never do it. So, what did my dumbass do as soon as I was offered a cigarette in 9th grade? And now, after years of smoking, analyzing how shitty this addiction makes me feel, how much money it costs me, and how little good it really brings to my life, yeah, I can say that smoking sucks, and I wouldn't recommend it. You know, simply not worth it, 3 out of 10, but hey, before I put that cigarette in my mouth, I just had someone telling me that it's bad to smoke, without really helping me get to the bare-bone bottom of why this is so. And, as you know, that was only enough to keep me away from the cancer sticks until I was old enough to start going out on my own. So the big question here is, how different is John's devotion to following the way of God from my devotion to not smoking when I was a child? Sure, his faith might be stronger, but just like I listened to my mom when she said that smoking kills, he listens to his preacher and to his holy book when they tell him to be a good Samaritan. This means that John's moral compass is rooted solely in faith, pure, unexplained faith, that is, and nothing else. My question is, what if his faith falters? What if Jonathan loses his family in a car accident, God forbid, has an existential crisis, and begins doubting the existence of an omnipotent and eternally good God? You know, gets real pessimistic about his beliefs. What is John left with then? I mean, he might as well start butt-chugging beers, fucking prostitutes, and robbing banks, right? Because his way of being and living was so intertwined with superstition that without that superstition, he simply becomes a sheep without a pastor, lost, no idea what's good or what's bad, no clue about how he should or shouldn't act and why. This is the danger of delegating your spirituality away to a belief. You risk becoming so dependent on it, having it comprise such a significant part of your identity that without it, you're simply an animal. No beliefs, no morals, no principles. This is exactly how I see those evil bandits from shows like The Walking Dead that were once regular people like you and I. They never had a moral compass to begin with. They never had well-founded principles. They played along with the rules laid down by society, but when that society crumbled, they became free to do whatever destructive things they may want to. So, if you don't want to be an evil bandit in the zombie apocalypse, which is a pretty reasonable wish, I think my only advice can be this. Try to distinguish good and bad, virtue and vice, etc., without basing those concepts on anything but themselves. If you want to be virtuous, then try to establish the value of virtue without drawing on any belief framework to do so. In this way, your life codex won't depend on the welfare of some social or religious or spiritual institution, and therefore it's going to serve you even in the most dire situations. Perhaps this is how we might embody values and convictions in the most truly sincere and meaningful way. I know, but maybe you should sleep on that. That's the end of my first critique, and it serves as an excellent segue to my second, because we touched on the point of how following a pre-built spiritual framework can make a person more superficial, and now I'm just going to add to that. Here it is. Superstition is limiting. These three words may sound really simple and straightforward, but the extent of the fact, when you think about it, it's actually terrifying. Here's a simple example. John's neighbor, Martha, she's big on astrology. She reads the horoscope every day.
Beats reading the news. It's much more insightful.
She jokes with her like-minded friends. And today, Martha's on a first date with a guy she's been talking to on Tinder. Everything was going well. They were getting on perfect, but uh-oh, she found out that her date is a Gemini.
It's too bad that Scorpios are incompatible with Geminis.
Martha sighs as she blocks him on all social media later that night. Martha's brother, on the other hand, fell in love with a black cat that came up to him at an animal shelter. But he couldn't allow himself to adopt.
You just can't take any chances with bad luck.
Martha potentially missed out on her soulmate, while her brother could have made a furry friend if it wasn't for his superstition. These examples are simple and hypothetical, but if you want to get real, let's get real. How about all the women that don't even dare to approach getting an education or trying to self-actualize in any other way because of their superstition? How many Indians are restricted in all aspects of their lives because of the role they were assigned to at birth in a rigid, ancient, and brutal caste system? This stuff is happening right now in the real world. How many people aren't satisfying their aspirations and becoming the best versions of themselves because their superstitions told them that it's not their place to do so? And how about from another point of view, how many brilliant scientists, artists, and philosophers are we, as a society, missing out on because people are held back by irrational beliefs? So to me, these 2 points comprise my ultimate and what I think is the most fundamental criticism of superstition and superstitious ideology. Look, in conclusion, my value judgment is that it's hella destructive to delegate your spirituality and philosophical life away to some belief that's founded in unquestioned convictions. We have a bunch of people missing out on unimaginably more fruitful, diverse, and prosperous lives than they are living because their belief deemed the alternatives unfitting for them. We have people whose principles, morals, and core guidelines of being are hanging by the threads of unquestioned faith. These people are held back from becoming the most authentic and ultimate versions of themselves. They are doomed to a life of superficiality, and our society is doomed to being comprised of superficial beings, ones which explain their entire lives and worldviews with paranormal ideas. What comes next? Cool. Superstition sucks, and we would all have a bunch of individualistic superstars getting the most out of life and making the world a better place if we just got rid of all of it. Let's put it all in a bag, throw it out. We can maybe start a revolution or a mass media campaign, convince everyone that they should build themselves up from scratch and say no to batch-produced life paths. Hold on there, Buster. I see you're excited, but let's slow it down a notch. I thought revolution might be tempting, but let's try thinking this through before we do anything rash. I have 2 simple questions. Are we ready? And is it possible? And I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to be the buzzkill here. Excuse me, Dawkins fanboys and our atheism followers. No, and no. Look, if you're listening to this and you're dogma-free, which is highly unlikely because we're all gonna be dogmatic in one way or another, but if you don't structure your life around a doctrine that has been laid down for you, be it religious, political, cultural, if you're out here really building your worldview from scratch, trying to make your own character in this wild RPG, you know that this shit is gut-wrenchingly hard. Rewarding? Yeah. I mean, at the very least, you are rewarded with becoming the most authentic version of yourself, but at what cost? When you tear yourself away from superstition, a lot of flesh gets left behind. Regrowing that flesh takes energy and time. You self-reflect, you analyze the world that surrounds you, you test different approaches to life, fail, start over. I mean, why do you think we have the stereotype that our atheism followers are like neckbeards that don't do anything with their lives except from omega lolling at Christians? Because getting rid of superstition, denying meaning, yeah, that's the edgy and fun part. But how about the step after that? That's when shit gets real. That's when you have to put in the work to create your own meaning. Да ёб твою мать, сколько раз надо закрывать и открывать? Сколько раз надо закрывать и открывать забор? Because getting rid of superstition, denying meaning, yeah, that's the edgy and fun part. But how about the step after that? That's when shit gets real. That's when you have to put in the work to create your own meaning. Take the initiative and show resilience in the face of the absurd nature of our existence by doing your best to live a meaningful and fulfilled life despite of it. Now, personally, I'm just privileged. I have so much free time and energy that I can dedicate a good portion of it to going through these 9 circles of hell. It's become a big part of my life, and I'm comfortable with that. You know, just thinking, reading, listening to others, thinking some more, and then sharing what I came to with you guys. There are people out there who have families to feed when they get to my age. Imagine being a blue collar with a wife and kid, working round the clock. You got like 1 hour a day worth of personal time. And that's not even worst case scenario. Some people don't know where they'll find their next meal when they're 22. Life is tough. And if you're in a position like that, life might have been tough right from the start. And how can you blame somebody like that for latching onto something that promises a light at the end of the tunnel? Something that gives their difficult and immensely arduous life meaning. And how can you blame somebody like that for not using the scarce amounts of extra time and energy that they may have on philosophizing about the nature of our existence and building a unique and healthy moral compass? Give that advice to somebody from the ghetto and they'll scoff at you, and they'll be completely justified when doing so. People that are in such tough walks of life need something, really anything, to justify their existence. Otherwise, I think they just might go insane. And they most often don't have any spare mental or physical resources to create meaning in life independently of a superstitious framework. So when you tell somebody like that there is no God, you're basically just saying your life sucks for absolutely no reason, and your suffering will not amount to anything. And they most likely are not anywhere near ready for that conversation. Can you imagine how that can fucking shatter somebody? I mean, gosh, it makes so much sense that Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Japan, these are among the most atheistic countries per capita. You know where else they rank highest? Yeah, quality of life. Remember when we talked about Maslow's pyramid in my very first video? Well, think of it this way. People can't sit around and think about meaning in a superstitionless life until they've secured at least the first 2 steps of it. And sorry to break it to you, but if you accept that premise, the upshot is that the greater part of people living on Earth are simply not ready to take life head on without some wacky belief to ease the pain. And asking them to do so would be plain out brutal if you're not giving them anything in return. And this leads me to my second point. Do you know those pictures where, it's like an ultra-futuristic city with skyscrapers and flying cars and a bunch of happy people everywhere, and the caption is, "This would be our world without religion," or something like that. Well, you know what the fundamental flaw in that picture is? This presupposition that the overwhelming majority of people, having given up all of their superstitions, would unanimously think, "Oh well, I guess I'll go work on myself and make the world a better place now." Yeah, that is the fundamental flaw. Look, we touched on the difficulties of building your own life path without superstition, and one thing that we got out of that point is that a high quality of life and a good amount of free time and energy are prerequisites for building this unique path. By the way, a high quality of life includes a high quality education, one that guides individuals to critical and independent thinking. The question begs itself, what kind of a result can we expect if we just tear people away from their superstitions, the superstitions which, no matter how tough life gets, had always reassured them that if they stay on the holy path, it will all be worth it in the end. So yeah, we tear them away from the psychological safe haven, but don't give them extra free time, energy, and quality of life to help recover from the blow in a healthy fashion. Probably a complete fucking mess. Guys, I'm trying to unpack quite a lot in this video, I know, and I want you to see that one of the overarching themes that I hope is coming across quite clearly is that the psychological challenge that we collectively face when met with such a vast and uncertain world as ours, superstition has a great share of flaws, but one thing that it can boast confidently is that it has kept a large amount of people sane despite this challenge throughout a long span of time. Yes, with great cost and casualties, but it has been doing that job. Well, let's go back in time and see how things played out the last time when superstition took a heavy hit and could not go on undertaking that job as effectively as it had been doing before. With rationalism and reason at the forefront of 18th and early 19th century philosophy, there came a point in time when, through the power of vigorous debate, reasoning, and scientific progress, a seemingly invincible foundation of society, I'm talking about theology, was irreparably damaged. Some time passed, and a sad German guy declared God as being dead. He asked an important question in that famous quote: "How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers?" Nietzsche was worried, and for good reason. Not long after he wrote his famous words in his book, The Gay Science, the world became a dark, dark place. At the beginning of this video, we talked about all those that suffered because of 20th century extremists and extreme ideologies, but who induced, or at the very least, tolerated their suffering? I'm not talking about the mustache-wielding guys themselves, I'm talking about all the millions of people that did not rebel against them. Look at this footage of thousands upon thousands of people weeping, taking their hats off as a symbol of respect, all deep in mourning. Do you think these people are burying a national hero? Maybe a Nobel Peace Prize winner? No. They're all gathered for the funeral of Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, a power-hungry, despotic, narcissistic mass murderer. How about this large crowd? All assembled for maybe a Led Zeppelin concert or for Obama's inauguration? Wrong again. These folk are all cheering on Adolf Hitler. Now, this might sound similar to my critique of superstition in part 1. Well, now we're taking a look at the issue from the other perspective. Look, if your plan doesn't go further than convince everybody that fairy tales don't exist, if you take away superstition from people and don't aid them in building their own healthy, virtuous, and individualistic worldviews, they're gonna start searching for a replacement. They're gonna start looking for the next best thing which will offer them meaning, purpose, and some sort of permanence. And they might not be too critical when shopping around for such a thing. Whatever floats their boat will do. Be it a political ideology, a cultural one, or whatever it may be, I'm sure we can all agree that having a big, juicy crowd looking for anything to latch onto and build their life around does not bode too well for the well-being of those individuals or of our world. So guys, I think I'd like to finish this part by returning to the questions which I asked at the very beginning of it and answering them a bit more comprehensively this time. Is it possible to just do away with religion? Are we ready to just throw it in the bin? No and no. Fun fact, over 50% of the world's population is in the low-income or poverty sector. That means that over 50% of all the people in the world are highly preoccupied with securing food, water, shelter, and safety. And, as you might have guessed, those 50% are either poorly educated or illiterate. As long as these people remain in such a predicament, they will not be prepared to take the time to pave their own life path. And if you want to take their beliefs away by force, they'll find the next best thing that promises them purpose, and that alternative could easily be much more destructive than the mainstream superstitions which we all know. Okay guys, time for the final part. Let's try to draw some kind of conclusion from all of this. So, superstition, by the feels of it at least, has been the root of heated discourse for as long as the human race can remember. And in this video, I didn't want to immerse myself in a discussion about the existence or absence of what we consider mystical. Neither did I want to critique any separate superstitious belief. That would have been pointless. I would never dream of single-handedly stopping the never-ending standoff between those that believe and those that deny. Instead, I tried to go straight to the point, straight for the bullseye, which is, if we all take a step back to the no man's land of debates about the supernatural, which is agnosticism, what can we say about the merits and shortcomings of incorporating superstitious belief into our lives? While we have no definite answer about the existence of anything beyond our physical universe, is that not the only question that truly matters? And keeping it real with you, the conclusions that we proceeded to draw were not very encouraging. Religious or proxy-religious beliefs and ideologies seem almost like placeholders, doctrines that keep the masses content, not too boisterous and relatively productive, at the cost of seriously limiting the potential of individuals all over the globe. I use the word placeholders because I feel as if superstition is a biscuit given to a fussy child to tide him over before dinner. As a society, we seem to have neither sufficient resources nor interest to invest in the upbringing of independent-minded and truly authentic humans. At least not en masse. And for the time being, we stuff a spoonful of dogma into the hungry mouths of the populace and pray that nothing significant enough happens to make their faith quiver and reveal the shallow soul that had been hiding beneath it. But what can we do? Now, I hope I made it clear enough that running around with foam in our mouths and yelling "God is dead" at everyone would be a frivolous attempt at changing the way that things stand. Superstition runs much deeper than many of us think. It's an instinct, a psychological safety net to comfort us when we're staring down the brutal, unforgiving, and indifferent world that surrounds us. Something that we can always count on, something that's always on our side. You can't take something so sacred away from people with your pretentious "facts don't care about your feelings" attitude. Now, the best path forward that I have come to, at least, is empowering people to such an extent that they themselves can feel confident and comfortable enough to cast doubts on the most sacred of their beliefs and meet our infinitely vast and infinitely confusing universe head-on. We can't tear people away from their superstition. Tough love will not work here. But we can be the best versions of ourselves and strive to transform the world around us in such meaningful and positive ways that will give others the means to break free from the chains of dogma. That's my video, guys. Thank you very much for listening. This is probably my longest and most emotionally taxing work yet. As always, the most important thing to me is to change minds and get people thinking. So the only reaction and the best reaction that I would love it for you to give is write something in the comments. Your thought, your emotion, your impression, anything that you felt during this video. And one more favor to ask you guys, never stop thinking. Thank you very much. This is Big Joe Thinks. Peace. Blah, 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 blah.